Today, NVIDIA is worth more than $3 trillion. Its chips train nearly every major artificial intelligence on Earth. The systems behind ChatGPT, behind Gemini, behind the models reshaping our world, all run on NVIDIA silicon. By some measures, it is the most important company alive. But rewind to 1996, and the picture is unrecognizable. NVIDIA had exactly one product. That product had failed completely. The company had burned through almost all of its cash, laid off most of its staff, and sat, in the words of its own founder, just 30 days from going out of business. This is the story of how a company nearly died twice and came back to rule the age of AI. And it begins not in a gleaming laboratory, but in a roadside diner, with 3 engineers and an idea almost everyone thought was insane. In 1993, 3 engineers met at a Denny's diner in San Jose, California. There was Curtis Priam, a gifted graphics architect. There was Chris Malachowski, an engineer out of Sun Microsystems. And there was a 30-year-old named Jensen Huang. Huang knew this diner intimately. As a teenager, he had bussed its tables and scrubbed its bathrooms. Now, over bottomless cups of coffee, the 3 made a bet that ordinary personal computers would one day need a dedicated chip just to draw 3D graphics, for games and far beyond. In 1993, that was a fringe idea. They started the company with around $40,000 and named it NVIDIA, from NV for next version and the Latin word invidia, meaning envy. The legendary investor Don Valentine of Sequoia agreed to fund them and reportedly warned Huang that if he lost the money, he would kill him. The pressure was there from day one. NVIDIA's first chip was the NV1, released in 1995. It was wildly ambitious. It didn't just render graphics, it bundled in audio and a game controller port, all on a single chip. But Huang's team made a fateful technical bet. Instead of building images out of triangles, the way the rest of the industry was heading, the NV1 used curved shapes, called quadratic surfaces. On paper, it was elegant. Then catastrophe struck. Microsoft released DirectX, and its 3D standard was built entirely around triangles. Overnight, the NV1's clever approach was incompatible with the way every game would now be made. Retailers shipped boxes of unsold chips straight back to NVIDIA. Even a partnership with Sega, whose Saturn console used NV1-style hardware, wasn't enough to stop the bleeding. The company's very first product had become its first near-fatal mistake. By 1996, NVIDIA was in freefall. The company had grown to around 100 people. Huang was forced to lay off more than half of them, shrinking back down to roughly 30 employees. The cash was nearly gone. And it was here that Jensen Huang began saying the line that would define the company forever. "Our company," he said, "is 30 days from going out of business." He would repeat that sentence for decades, even at the absolute height of success, a permanent reminder of how close they had come to the edge. With almost nothing left, the team made an all-or-nothing decision. They would abandon the NV1's failed philosophy entirely, bet every remaining dollar on a single new chip, and finally do the one thing the industry demanded. Build for triangles. There would be no second chances. If the next chip failed, NVIDIA was finished. In 1997, NVIDIA shipped the Riva 28. This time, they built for triangles, with full compatibility for Microsoft's 3D standard, and they made it blisteringly fast. The Riva 128 was one of the first chips to combine high-performance 2D and 3D graphics on a single, affordable card. The market responded instantly. NVIDIA sold around 1 million units in the first 4 months alone. The company that had been 30 days from death was suddenly, violently alive. And from that moment on, Huang imposed a brutal discipline. NVIDIA would ship a new, faster chip roughly every 6 months, a relentless pace designed to grind competitors into dust. The Riva TNT followed, then the TNT2, each one raising the bar higher. NVIDIA wasn't just surviving anymore. It was hunting. 1999 was the year NVIDIA truly arrived. In January, the company went public on the Nasdaq under the ticker NVDA. Then, late that year, it released the GeForce 256 and made a bold claim. The GeForce 256 was the first consumer chip with built-in hardware transform and lighting, meaning it could handle heavy calculations the computer's main processor used to do. NVIDIA branded it with a brand new term. It called it a GPU, a graphics processing unit. That single phrase would go on to define an entire category of computing. And the wins kept piling up. Microsoft chose NVIDIA to power the graphics of its very first Xbox. NVIDIA then bought its old rival, 3DFX, absorbing the competition. By the early 2000s, the little diner startup had become the undisputed king of computer graphics, and gamers everywhere knew its name. Then Jensen Huang made the most important and most ridiculed bet of his entire life. He looked at the GPU and saw something most people had missed. It wasn't just a graphics chip. It was a massively parallel processor, capable of running thousands of calculations at the very same time. So in 2006, NVIDIA launched CUDA, software that let any programmer harness that raw power for general computing, not just for games. And Huang did something radical. He built CUDA into every single NVIDIA chip, even the cheap consumer cards, eating into the company's profit margins year after year. Wall Street was baffled. For nearly half a decade, CUDA looked like an expensive science experiment with no real market. Analysts kept asking why NVIDIA was pouring billions into a feature almost nobody used. But Huang held the line. He was building, in his own words, for a future that had not arrived yet. That future arrived in 2012. At the University of Toronto, 3 researchers, Alex Krzyzewski, Ilya Sutskever, and Jeffrey Hinton, entered a neural network called AlexNet into ImageNet, the world's biggest image recognition contest. They trained it on 2 NVIDIA GeForce GTX 58 gaming cards, using CUDA. AlexNet didn't just win, it demolished the competition, slashing the error rate so dramatically that it stunned the entire field of computer science. It was the spark that ignited the deep learning revolution. And it had run on NVIDIA hardware. Almost overnight, every serious AI researcher on Earth realized the same thing. To train neural networks, you needed GPUs. The expensive science experiment that Huang had been mocked for, year after year, was suddenly the single most important tool in all of artificial intelligence. The decade-early bet had finally paid off. Huang saw the opening, and he turned the entire company toward it. NVIDIA poured everything into AI and the data center, building specialized chips and systems just for training neural networks. In 2016, Huang personally hand-delivered NVIDIA's first AI supercomputer, the DGX-1, to a young research lab called OpenAI. For years, data center revenue grew quietly alongside gaming. And then, in late 2022, OpenAI released ChatGPT, and the world changed overnight. Suddenly, every company on Earth was racing to build artificial intelligence, and all of them needed the very same thing. NVIDIA's chips. Its H100 processor became the most sought-after piece of hardware on the planet, back-ordered for a year, fought over by the biggest tech giants in the world. NVIDIA's data center revenue didn't just grow. It exploded, climbing hundreds of % in a single year. And in May 2023, NVIDIA crossed $1 trillion in value. And the climb did not stop. In June 2024, NVIDIA briefly became the most valuable company in the entire world, surpassing $3 trillion, built almost entirely on the chips powering the AI revolution. Jensen Huang, the immigrant kid who once cleaned tables at a Denny's, now stood on stage in his trademark black leather jacket as the most important figure in all of technology. So think about how close it all came to never happening. Twice, NVIDIA was 30 days from death. Its very first product was a failure. Its biggest bet, CUDA, was openly mocked for years. But the NV1 disaster forged a culture obsessed with survival and speed. And the CUDA gamble, made a full decade too early, is the exact reason that NVIDIA, and not Intel, and not anyone else, owns the age of AI today. As Huang still says, even now, the company is always 30 days from going out of business. That paranoia built an empire.